There once was a man who saw the world as unique. This man was deeply inspired from his futuristic world. Many people who were born into this world were uniquely a product of many ideas put into one. However, this man wanted to create something of his own, a child who was both human and machine. He took inspiration from everything to create this super child. From their hands to their feet, insane speeds, this child would have everything. And during this time, the world would fall into great darkness, and his creation would be the one to stop the coming threat. Now, everything the man used to create this new child would save the world. And that brings me to the topic of today's video about the manga design process. But before we get into this video, if you're new, don't hesitate to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and hit that bell for notifications when you want to hear things that I have to say. Now let's get into it. Hey there everyone, it's Vandal here, and this video is for people who want to elevate their character designs or are simply new to this process. If you're either of these people, this video is for you. This video is in line with the series on the steps of how to make manga, and if you're not so familiar with the other steps, I would check those out in the link down below. Now, at this point in the process, I would want to make sure that I have some idea of the characters that I want to create for my series, if you know what I mean. You know, when it's that time to create the dialogue for the script, you need an image of the characters. Gosh, what do you think I meant? But one of the best parts of this process is the excitement to draw new characters. The excitement that brews inspiration. Maybe it's something that you've read or watched, but your creative juices are just flowing. I would say let's take that excitement and put it to the side for now and find out what caused your great burst of excitement in the first place. And we're talking about excitement, nothing else, people. And that begins with our research. Now let's get into the research. There are two kinds of research that I want to get into. The first kind of research looks at the characters you like. You know, the characters you like with the great character and design and personality? Well, we're going to research all those characters you like and create a Pinterest board full of pictures that you like, or whatever works for you. It could be a folder as well, but you just need to have a place that you can refer to later on because it's going to be important. Let's call this your reference board, your character board, whatever you want. Now for this part, what you need to do is write down or take mental notes about the characters that you've just collected. Take your time to look at them and see what you like about them in terms of what do you think works for those characters. Is it their face? Is it their hair? The way they stand? The more detailed you are with figuring out what you think works, the more you'll be able to understand about your own character and their design and what works for them. For example, let's look at Goku, who has a unique spiky haired pattern. His muscle build is unique, and the use of colors of blue and orange make him stand out. And he also has those giant muscles, let's not forget those giant muscles, to denote his strength. We can look on the flip side, where there's also Naruto, who you could argue is a Goku clone, but I think is a great example of inspiration. This is enhanced with inspiration to make more of an interesting design with your character. Naruto's spiky yellow hair shows us his rebellious nature in the beginning of the series. His orange and blue is an allude to his desire to stand out and to be noticed, but I also think it's a nice nod to Goku and his color scheme, which is something we will get into later. His slender build works for him being a shinobi and not body built like Goku. Can you imagine Naruto looking like Goku?
No, God! No, God, please, no! No! No!
Naruto adds even more flair with his unique use of whiskers on his face. So as we can see here, we can do this for every character, breaking down what works for them to increase our own ideas that we can use for our own character. This research type is to have a general understanding of what works for popular characters in a series that inspire you so that you can use them in your own character. The next type of research is more specific, as this will apply to the character that you want to create. Just like you did before, you're going to look at characters that have some facet of what you want your character to have. So what you're going to do next is pick as many characters as you can to find that fit you want your character to have. For example, you might want them to have big eyes, a particular style of hair, or a certain accessory. It's really up to you. There are many things that you might be looking for your character. And for this, I would recommend another Pinterest board for your specific character instead of noting what works for the character that you're looking at and what you think works for your character that you have in mind. We're not looking for a one-to-one translation, but using the reference will really help you with your creative process and expedite it. So you can see what you really need to draw your character or those accessories. That said, not every character will have what you want or exactly what you need, so I would add this part to your research, and that is look up fashion and or clothing or weapons or accessories for your character that you were unable to find through the characters that you did in your initial search. I did this in the creation of Bomo in 2 ways. Actually, it was many ways. But I first looked up a lot of characters that looked like Mugen from Samurai Champloo, Devilman Crybaby, and even the main character of Megalobox. And so what I did from each of these is I picked things that I liked from each of their character designs. I like the sash from Samurai Champloo, so I put that in the headband for Bomo. I like the hair from Devilman Crybaby because each of those characters have a little bit of a similar characteristic in their design, so I added that into him. And then I even added the extra street fashion because I wanted it to add to his toughness as a character, and that's why he has like those shredded parts on his hoodie. I might have also sprinkled in a little bit of Blue Exorcist in his face, give him that tough look too, and that Kingdom Hearts in his design because of those huge sneakers though. So I took a little bit of each character part that I like to create Bomo, and that's what you can do to heighten your design. But we really need to develop our ideas, and that's where we need to keep things simple. So here we are, ready to put pencil to paper or Apple Pencil to iPad. We have our research notes from what we want in our character, and we need to make a sketch of this character because they need to take some sort of form at this point. But one of the things that we need to do here is keep it simple and not worry too much about the final result. Let's just get our character to a place where we can say we actually like them. So let's start with the shapes and breaking them down to see what kind of build they have. So what kind of body are they going to have? Are they going to be built, skinny, round, or fluffy? And what does that do for the character in the context of our story? So normally I would like to think of this as the skeleton of my character and how big or small they are. That's something that can make them stand out very well in your story. Now let's take a look at an example of All Might, who has 2 very distinct character designs. One is inspiring with a huge build, Superman-like build, and the other, well, you hope he doesn't let the wind take him on the way out. And in the story, we know why All Might is this way, and that adds so much more to the design, but it also tells us a lot without us even needing to know about what it means to the story when he's first introduced. Now, one thing that we do as artists that's a pretty bad habit is we tend to get into too much detail. We love adding details because we want our artwork to look great, and that's awesome. But what I want you to do now is take a step back. And what I'm saying is not to go all stick figures or not to add in some of the ideas that we did in the previous section, but to find a balance. And some things can come in later, and some ideas you have can be noted here, but we just want a simple idea of the character. Maybe their hair, maybe some stuff that they wear, maybe a few important key items here and some accessories, but we don't want to worry about that until we get to a later portion in the video. What we want to do now is build that solid foundation of our simplistic character. Okay, so now you might ask, isn't it important to get everything down now? And I would say yes, but also no. That said, your character as they are now has to and will change, and that's okay. But that's why I don't want you to get too settled in how they look now, because I talked about this in my video on the creation of Note, but I went through about 6 to 10 drawings of each character to flesh them out until I got to the final idealized form. And going through this 6 to 10 drawing process is something that I recommend that you do, but we'll get into that a little bit more when we get into character iteration. So the reason why I say don't get into too many details with your design and keep it simple is because over the course of your series, you will draw your main character hundreds of thousands of times, in addition to the many more other characters inside of your manga that you're going to draw just as much. Now, while you don't want your characters to be basic, you want them to be impactful and memorable, but also reproducible to your skill level. So as you might want to go into intense detail with characters like Guts from Berserk, and that's great, your skill set might not be there yet to reproduce those designs in an effective and timely manner for those deadlines that you're going to set for yourself. it's also going to be impossible, or at least not worth the effort you're going to put in to do that. Again, this is a balancing act that you need to find with the characters you want to create and the artistic skills that you have. So try your best to keep what you want, but make sure you can do it consistently, and if you can, practice and adjust your design till you're able to go for it. How I love the challenges of balancing what you want and what you're able to do. It's a sad but tragic tale. Now this is the last piece that'll help give your character, well, their character. Now what do I mean by the character? Let's start with the pose.
Jojo, pose, pose, pose. Jojo, pose, pose, pose.
This might be something that is a meme in the anime community, but I think the memification of this just shows how impactful it is for your character. If you look at how a character stands or sits, you can see how if they're brave, afraid, aggressive, and so on. For example, L from Death Note, how he sits in his reserved nature, the way All Might stands, ready, pumping his chest out, ready for anything that might come his way, or even Shikamaru in his laid back and aloof nature, showing how he's very just chill about everything. You can get a lot from a character's pose. Here you're shown the base of your character, as they're gonna have a lot more emotions throughout your story, but who they are in their natural state will be best shown in this pose. That's why a lot of people who create their original character's initial drawings can seem still and stiff and not as emotional feeling through their character's pose. It's usually the generic, front-facing pose, but when you're showing the world your character, show them someone they want to get to know and make that more interesting for them so they want to know more about your character. Because generally, aspiring mangaka will hit the same pose, which I think is good initially for maybe a character sheet, but to really understand your character, you should pose them in a way that lines with their personality so your viewer is interested just as much as you are in your own character. It's great for adding that last unsaid feeling to your character that can be conveyed to the reader. However, the next part is what will show the true strength of your character's design. Okay, so let's play a game. It's called Guess That Character. So on the screen here, you're gonna see there are gonna be a few characters, and I want you to guess who they are. Don't worry, I'll give you a few seconds to guess who these characters are. Put your guess in the comment section. You probably got a 10 out of 10, as you should have. The thing that all these characters have in common is a strong silhouette. This is the perfect test to see if your character design is strong. Cover your character in black and see what stands out and what doesn't. Does their hair pop? Does the character's important item stand out? And what does the pose do for you to know what the character is about? Your design should stand out and should be readable to those who are viewing it. Again, this goes back to the simplicity of your character design and the shapes that are used to create them. Again, make your character distinct and something that will catch your reader's eye. But, and I say this, don't just make your character stand out for the sake of being flashy without a reason. Your character design is in line with your story creation. You should know why they look the way they do and be able to rationalize that within your story. And if you can do that, just go wild. The most important part in creating the silhouette is to subtract all the bells and whistles of your design and see what still holds up and is unique about your character. In this way, you can see the flaws of your design and you can go back and tweak it and make it stronger so it's able to stand out a lot better than it did before. This will help elevate your design to a whole new level. So just a few minutes ago, I said don't make your character design flashy. That again is to say in the context of making your designs flashy for the sake of doing that. But what I will say to do is exaggerate. I will say that make your manga designs unique so they have a better chance to become more memorable with those who read your manga. Think about how One Piece and Eiichiro Oda really plays with every part of his character designs, as it adds to the diversity of the characters in his world. In addition, there's a consistency to that madness that makes it part of the world, and thus it is normal to his style of drawing. The unique body proportions also will help the visual strength of your character designs to stand out. It's a really hard balance, but I think weaving it through some of your characters will give you a more diverse ensemble as well as creative looking characters. Now we need to bring all of this together into the final part of our process. and that's character iteration. So in the end, we all grow and change, but here's where you need to put into perspective all that we've learned so far. So now that we have a loose idea of what our character looks like, what I would do at this phase is redraw the draft that we started at the beginning of this whole process. So instead of a full body, I would start with the head, the face, and the hair. So let's go with an example of Caesar from Note. I gave him a unique dreadlocked hairstyle with a side fade because I gotta let my guy look mad clean. This gave his hair dual meaning that appeals to his culture of the people that he wants to save, and a clean shaven look to be accepted in the workforce and society as a whole. And I didn't want him to have a hardened face to allow the reader to better empathize with him. The earring he wears shows that he has a connection still to his people, and is also a symbol of servitude to the Varkan overlords that rule over them. I worked on this design a few times, and then I went on to the full body. So with this process, you can see that there's a lot of thinking of meaning that I want to impart onto the reader. So you're always thinking about how your visual design tells a little bit about the character and a little bit about the story as they learn and pick it up as they read and go on. It's very important to think about as you're designing your characters. This is just a little tidbit that I wanted to add in here. And this is where I played a lot with Caesar's style. I drew Caesar a lot in many different ways, and I wanted his style to feel futuristic, but also contemporary, and not someone who was so detached from his cultural group. And to do that, I used the motif of the circle, which is culturally important to his people and kept him connected to them. So I grounded a lot of my designs in the circle. But as you can see, I was trying to find a way to include that, but not let it take over the design totally, since it could be distracting and overwhelming. But I was able to keep the jacket and simplify it and minimize his clothing to also add to his personality as someone who is focused but not thinking about the clothes necessarily. But there were so many versions of this one character, I eventually landed on this, and this is what I mean when I say iterate. Don't just draw your character once. Sometimes you'll get it on the first try, but the more time you put into your character and the more variations you make, you'll be able to decide what you actually like out of all of those choices. There also might be the fact that you like the one design that you made, and that's great, but hear me out. The nice thing about having all of these designs is that you can use them for maybe your time skip or even to vary up how your character dresses, because we all don't want to be that manga character that wears the same outfit every episode. That said, I would do about like 10 of these different drawings, and then I would just make a tournament arc, and then we just get down to whoever the winner is, just like I picked all of my designs. And that said, I would like to know which ones did you guys actually like out of all the designs that I chose for Caesar. I'm gonna put them up here, and then you can put it in the comments section down below and let me know what you think about them. Now, once you've decided what you wanted to pick in your character design, it's time to make that final reference sheet, or what I'd like to call the character sheet. And what goes into your character sheet is up to you or to whomever you're working for. That said, I think there are some things that should be in your character sheets, and the first part is, well, your character. That's pretty obvious. But really, you want a full body rendering of your character, and you might also want to add the back and the front of your character. You can also add more angles. This is just to help you have a bit more information as you're going to reference it throughout drawing your character through many different angles through the course of your manga. Included in this, I would show a headshot, since there'll be times where you'll have close-ups, and in addition, you might want to have a facial emotional chart of your character, as they may go through a range of emotions during your story, unless they only have one emotion, or maybe they even wear a mask. I think that posing will also help your character at this point. It'll give you an understanding of how they'll look in certain situations, and also that feel of your character that you want to convey to whoever might be looking at this, or for yourself to remember what kind of personality they have as you draw them throughout your panels. And there will be this range of emotions. How will they react when they're sad, mad, or happy? These are all of various amounts that can be all shown through your stance and through your character reference sheet. And these aren't all a requirement, but the more information that you have on your character, the less thinking on the spot or on the fly changes that you'll have to make once you're creating your manga. Now, with everything finalized, there are a few more things you might want to think about at this point, or maybe even in the iterative process. This is a process that takes a while, and I wouldn't rush it, and take your time with going through everything that you need to add. Remember, the more detailed you are in any phase of this manga making process, the easier it'll be once you get to the end. I know it takes a lot of time now, but just remember, the more time you put in now, the less time you'll have to have a headache later. Oh, believe me, it'll be less of a headache. Now it's it's time for the bells and whistles, or the cherry on top. We've now created a solid character design through our rigorous repetition and hard decisions. But one of the things I hinted at but didn't go into much was the accessories. This is the most fun part of creating your character. Letting them have that bling bling, is really great. I think I can't say don't go overboard at this part, but do what works for your character. Give them a sword, a scarf, heck, put a bandana on their eyes. Gosh, why didn't I think of that? I'm sorry. That said, I look at everyday items and see how they could possibly work for my character, and you should do the same for yours. For example, I used the ring motif with Caesar when he transforms, and I used it as his weapons, and I even put some of those rings inside of his hair, and even gave him a cloak when he transformed to make him really cool. Now let's look at my other character, Bomo. I used the headband and earrings and even the horns to accent as accessories to make him a little bit more interesting, just to see where he'd look like, also with maybe some torn sleeves and a hoodie to add to the fashion of that tough guy aesthetic that I talked about earlier, and also to give a chance to show off his besieger tattoos, which are really important to the story. So make your accessories stand out in something that can be subtle but also adds to your character to make them unique and unforgettable, because that's the real goal here. We're trying to make these characters memorable and unforgettable. And this is the last part, because usually in manga, color isn't used too much except for maybe your cover art or even like spreads, normally just to save money. But if you're looking to have an all color manga or just want to have that reference, which is always good to have, you can also think about that when it's time to do so. So remember when we talked about Goku and Naruto earlier and how their colors were used to make them show up and show out and your eye is directed to them? Your color, just like everything else, should reflect the character in some way, or in some instances not so like just outlandish for the sake of being so, but maybe have it be meaningful again and memorable, so when we see those color patterns again, we just remember that, oh yeah, that's insert person's character. So the way that I did that with the colors I used for the Paranormal Club and Besieger, I have colors for each of them inspired by like characters from Samurai Champloo, but are also emblematic of their own character types, except for one. Can you actually guess who it is? That said, Bomo has a red for the rage, and the other visual elements add to that bad boy aesthetic that we talked about earlier. And then we have Bat, who is a little bit more refined aesthetically, looking a little bit fancy, but I wanted to also give him a bit of a sleuthy kind of side behind his appearance. And then lastly, we have Pix, who is very bright and showy, but isn't exactly all that expressive as her palette is, and there's a reason for it in the story. And if you want to know more about the story about Besieger, hit that like button, because I'd love to talk about it and maybe make a video on it. Alright, so this is the final part where we put everything that we've learned all together and see what we remember. So let's start with what we need to do first, and that is you want to research all you can on your favorite characters that you like and see what those characters do well. Then what you want to do is look at what applies to the character that you want to make and use that inspiration to put a character together. Make a simple mock-up and then keep the design simple like we talked about, which is very important, and keep adding to it and make many drawings before you get to the end of the character's design, and then style them up and make them unforgettable, but don't forget to make them memorable. That's what we're fighting for, everyone. We're trying to make them memorable. But yeah guys, that's all I have for you today, and if you made it to the end of this long video, thanks again. So question, what's the hardest part of character designing? I want to know the ins and outs. I've talked about it today, but before you saw this video, I want to know what was really hard about it. I know I find having to draw characters over and over to be quite annoying, so let me know in that comment section down below. And if you're new and this is your first time seeing my face, don't forget to subscribe, hit that bell for notifications when you want to hear things that I have to say, and hit that like button because you liked the video and it was helpful to your manga making process. Yeah. Alright guys, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace. Bye.